Okay, microphones are on. We're back to Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is August 23rd, 2023. We're discussing our item number 12, ARPA updates and funding considerations, extended agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Chair DeBonne, Commissioners. Thank you for bringing us back to have this conversation and work through some of these projects that are on the list that you have before you. I do want to highlight before we start, there are a couple different ways you can go about this. One of the options is if you have your attachment in front of you, the top table that has available ARPA funds, you will notice that there's a general ARPA funds available of 2.9 million. Those are funds that weren't previously allocated to a contingency account. You will notice there is a contingency public health response, and the balance in that is 624,395, and contingency health unintended consequences 651,381, and then childcare workforce contingency of 906. So the board previously directed that we set aside an allocation for that contingency. So one option is to continue to spend funds within those contingency categories, and then we'd have to know when you approve projects, where's the contingency coming from, and is it still fitting within those categories? It's option one. Another option is you can release the contingency into the general ARPA available, and then you could decide of the $5.1 million, it can go to any category as well. So that's one decision point. I think it may help or hinder, your process, but that could be it may help guide the conversation if it's part of a general pot or if you're sticking within categories. And as we work through these items again, I do recommend if you could start with the current obligations. One is the board has already committed to those projects. We just need the funding allocated for that based on previous board decisions. And then we can work through the rest. Laura does have a spreadsheet here. And as decisions are made, we can plunk in the numbers, update the numbers for a more technical term. And then we can, change the allocations as we go. If you do decide to fund the current obligations, again, not presupposing an outcome, but if you do, those can even be done in a lump sum, and then, then we can move on to the other ones that might make it easy as well. So just some thoughts as far as process that may help you as well.
So looking at the top section, ARPA funds available, the child care workforce development contingency is a good reminder that was the contingency basically for the ask of neighbor impacts efforts. So that kind of helps guide that as a decision up front.
And are you able to read this spreadsheet on the screen in front of you?
Yeah, generally. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, I can. It's pretty small, but I've got a copy. Yeah, exactly.
We're good.
So that was just an opening kind of comment. And then, the public health and health unintended consequences are in those same, categories of contingency. Robert, you were saying, maybe do something active up there. I think we're at a point where we can just kind of leave them there. I don't know that we need to change around the spreadsheet, I guess, is structure of the spreadsheet is kind of the concept. If we would say, let's not call this contingency anymore, let's all just put it in a big pool, but I don't mind just leaving that top section the way it is. Just as a starting point.
I maybe Robert was offering that one of the ways we could dive into this would be through the contingencies, kind of say we have this child care contingency. What do we want to do within that contingency, and kind of break it down, work at it from categories of available funds. But that'll certainly be in the back of my head as we go through each of these requests anyway. So I'm open to working at it however people want to work at it.
Well, and then, as I say, going back to that one again, so childcare workforce development contingency. If we allocate some amount less than that, do we think of it, do we hold it into that contingency after we're done today, or just not refer to it as a future contingency into that category? So we'll get there. We'll, when we're done.
I know you're trying to simplify this. and yeah, just leaving it as 5.159, I think it's fine. And, I think then we need to, you suggested the current obligations, the 1.6 million. So, yeah, I think that's what we should approach first.
So getting to that section of current obligations, are there any accepting the package or changes proposed? I would possibly float that the first two items could be discussed a little bit here. So Veterans Village operations, it's nice to have American Rescue Plan dollars out to the 2026 timeframe. But I'm just thinking that's another place where we could, reduce those dollars in support of something else. So knowing that we have made a commitment and we are going to pay for those. I remember when we made that commitment, it just kind of felt like that was going to be $100,000 a year out of our general fund for a period of time. So I'm just kind of calibrating where I was thinking that money was going to come from originally.
I will just remind the board too on those top items. We did not include any of these expenses in the long-term forecast for the general fund. So anything that's not funded through the ARPA dollars will be added to that next long-term forecast that we get, which I think we've talked about the long-term forecast as well.
Right. Or we could work at that, for example, if we're talking about Veterans Village operations, we could say we're going to fund Veterans Village operations, which is a 10-year commitment from us. We're going to fund that for the next 2 years out of ARPA, and then we'll look at other things. We wouldn't have to make any adjustments right away, but
yeah, actually, I should have clarified. After 2026, we do have that $100,000 in the long-term forecast for the out years, but not for the years during the ARPA eligible period.
got it. Okay.
And these are all going to be balances here. I mean, yeah, it's the discussion. So, and then Veterans Village expansion, that's a request for those cottages. As I say, my vision was always that would be, 15 units or so. Now they want to expand, and there seems to be support for that. But then once again, now we're pulling it right out. And as I say, I go back to, I guess, so the big driver for me today is the fact that this neighbor impact food warehouse expansion request for $1 million is critical. Just communicating with Scott Cooper and Neighbor Impact, critical for getting that over the finish line. So that's $1 million request. And then 1.5 million from Mountain View Community Development is a big number, and everything kind of revolves around those two big numbers, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Well, the thing about Scott Cooper, we already gave 2.4 million to that project. And how did it get so over budget? I mean, we have people that in Sun River that know they have to watch every dime, and coming up with another $1 million for that, I think, is incredibly significant. So and the Veterans Village, those cabins will be done by November. And I know that JW has said they want the actual social center to be expanded upon before they bring in, where they actually start utilizing those 7 cabins. But what's more important than doing something really positive for our veterans program, the fact that they probably had about 15 people now move on to permanent housing, I think that's really outstanding. They're doing an amazing job, and I'm going to go to their meeting tomorrow morning and hear about.
These are all good causes. So
right. Well, we'd already said we would do that. We already voted on it. Maybe you didn't vote for it, but I think the 300,000 is incredibly critical. And it's a program that works. It actually works. We know that people are moving on to permanent housing. They're getting great support services. It's, it's something to be really proud of in Deschutes County.
So is that the first number to plug in then, 300,000?
I don't think anyone's arguing about taking money away from our commitments, the commitments that we've made to Veterans Village. I think we're asking, one of the things that's being asked here is, whether we want to pay for all of that out of ARPA or whether we want to look at.
No, I think, yeah, that number, sure, the 450,000, we could do only, let's say, 200,000 there. And then no, we have to fund it when those years come up.
I will say on that one, it is, I believe that it was allocated last fiscal year or the year before, so it is a little bit of a back. It would be backdated payments as well, so that's why it's at 450,000.
Oh, that's why it's at 450.
So if we
I was like
did
going, what is
200,
that?
it would probably bring us to current.
Today.
What would bring us current?
If you allocated 200,000.
Okay,
Um,
I'm okay with that. Because I know we have things on the back page that we're going to want to do something for.
What about you?
Yeah, 200, 250. That would, that would be reasonable from my perspective.
So yeah, 250 is the number I was thinking, and it's more information knowing that we're going backwards on that before we go forwards. But I support that also, just knowing that these are those variables that are going to be kind of
Okay,
sliced.
so we're going to do 250 and we're going to, that's saving us 400,000 for something else.
200,000.
You want 250, 200? Which one?
250.
Right, okay, 250.
So then Veteran Village expands to 300,000. Is there support for taking?
That's
What amount?
urgent near term. When the folks from Veterans Village were here or upstairs talking with us, I didn't want to commit to 300,000, but we did make that commit to that amount. So I don't see how else we pay for that if it has to happen this year, then out of these ARPA funds. So.
Okay, current obligations is what we're talking about. So, okay, 300,000.
And Hayden Homes has already stepped up. So isn't that incredible? The first year I thought we would start that program in 2020 in 3 months. And we didn't. It took a whole nother year. But this time, the fact that they're going to do those 7 cabins that fast, I think is really commendable. And I am so appreciative.
So then 500,000 wastewater treatment plant, Terrebonne wastewater. Is there support for that the way it's written up?
And the other half is going to come from PILT then?
That's where we're planning on those funds coming from at this point.
Do we have a sense yet of whether we are going to actually receive that bonus PILT money that Chris kind of worked us through the mechanics of?
We did actually receive PILT money this year in our Fund 725 fiscal year 23, but we didn't receive the extra amount. So we are anticipating that extra amount because they won't deduct that other amount, if you remember that kind of the graphic. So we should be receiving that. So we're still anticipating we will be receiving those funds. Yes.
When will we know?
I don't think it comes till later in the fiscal year. So it won't be until later. It won't be early in this fiscal year at all. I think maybe, I can't remember, we might have received the funds in May. It was later, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so yeah, 500 for that though. It sounds like that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Yep. And then coordinated household response office. This is kind of that same variable we started with, as in this is our future obligation. So it was what, first 3 years were funded by the $1 million, or first 2 years?
It was first 2, but I think the funding is actually going to last a bit longer, isn't it? What is our about? We're like at 800,000 or something now, I think, of remaining funds.
Yeah, that was the number mentioned. So then is this a partnership with other jurisdictions also?
Or is this the county alone?
Thanks,
Isn't it-
Eric.
I think what you're seeing there is just the projected county contribution, but it's yet to be determined.
Yeah, okay. Well, I support keeping that there. I mean, that's the path we're on at this point in time, and hopefully we'll get that all dialed in.
Yes,
I mean, we will get that all dialed
we
in.
will get it all dialed in.
Okay,
Okay, so that gets us the first one. We trimmed a
So
little.
now we're at 14,425, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
see.
Okay.
Nope. So you'll see that those are coming out of that general ARPA balance up at the very top, that first bucket of money. But then it's also pulling out of that total remaining balance right here so we have a remaining total of 3,734,182. To move
Well,
forward.
that's very handy.
Ooh, fancy.
And just confirming, yes, the amount was 815,000 for remaining in the coordinated houselessness funds.
Okay, so the next section.
I
So,
mean, if
yeah.
it really is, if there is that much, I mean, can we pare this down a little? Could we, because I don't know if there's a time frame that 815,000 needs to be expended within, but we're only talking about making ARPA allocations for the Coordinated Homeless Response Office through December 31st, 2026. So I mean, if on the front end, there's going to be funds to carry the Coordinated Homeless Response Office longer than the initial 2 years, then at least within this time frame before December 31st, 2026, we don't have to put 375,000 in here. Is that, am I off base there?
I don't think we do. Just depends.
No, I don't think you're off base at all. Yeah, the money from the $1 million from the state, I mean, the commitment is just to keep the office operating for 5 years.
So
Could we pay for it here or
could
no?
we safely shave off like 100,000 off of this, of 375,000, or?
I would think so.
As is on the note there, I mean, Eric can decide, but we estimated it was $250,000 per year. So that's where the 375, it's 1.5 years. So if you want to do it in a full year increment, that would be about $250,000. But it can be any
Half year
dollar.
increment is good, like 125, shave 125 off of here, give ourselves pull back a half a year of funding.
So 250, you're saying then 250?
Put the number 250 in there.
So go with 250. Is that, I mean.
That makes
is
perfect
that-
sense because we're
Do you think is that comfortable? Like, is it, can we, do we feel like we're covering our commitments?
It's all about the general fund in the future.
Yeah, I'd have to kind of run a projection.
But do you have the
But that's
access to the funds we have right now? Isn't it like 800,000? Isn't that what the number?
Robert just said 815.
817, yeah.
I mean, the
817.
current burn rate is,
Yeah.
100, it's not even 250,000 a year.
Now, those, there have not been any program expenses incurred recently, so that's why also the number's high. So if you start increasing the amount of program expenses, then that would drop sooner, even though, or fill a position, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the determination will be when it moves to COIC and what their staffing model looks like. That will largely impact the cost of the program.
But there wasn't anything in the actual legislation that said we had to spend all that money in the first 2 years. So
That's correct.
that's the really good news. So if we actually watch it really frugally and we're getting more state funding, I think really going down to 250 makes sense.
I would hope that if there's actual programmatic things that we want to do, we will also be looking at additional, finding additional funds from additional places to actually to actually implement the plan. But.
And this is just one more example where the county has committed to this. The question here is, will it be ARPA funds or will it be general funds? Unless there's some other funding source from the state that comes along. But so this is really about allocating ARPA funds towards this.
I guess, but what I'm trying to get at is if there's still 815,000 available right now, then maybe we don't need to put ARPA funds or general funds for some period of time because we're still covered by the 815 that's in the bank. Yeah, so I would be comfortable proposing that we go to a commitment of 250 for this time frame prior to December 31st, 2026.
Okay, that's the number that's in there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.
So new ARPA considerations. Couple of these are kind of looking out for Deschutes County proper here for the services we're providing. So basically we could spend the rest of the dollars right here and be done, huh?
Yes, we could.
The last thing on this list, the reimbursement of ARPA eligible costs, I think Robert was explaining how we could defer that decision till the end of December 2020 or till December 2024. Basically to see if there's any ARPA dollars still on the table that were returned for us from other projects, things like that, before we put it into ARPA eligible expenditures that we've already made. So I would suggest that we follow that advice and postpone that action, that $1 million action, until a later date.
So there's nothing in that category right now. We'll finalize it as we get up and down this. What about homeless camps? So this is the same discussion we just had, putting in this camping ordinance, talking to the governor, not having a place, not seeing a lot of land available in the city of Bend.
So what right now have we allocated for the code enforcement cleanup? Is that like 200,000? And how long with the contracts that we've signed, is that projected to cover that location for sanitary facilities, toilet, hand washing, trash disposal, and security? I believe we're doing that too, aren't we not?
Yes, we were also doing security. I thought it was 250.
Is it 250?
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, we're just getting the
How
contract.
long is that 250 for? Will it cover? Is it for 5 months, 6 months?
I don't know.
Christie's in the back of the room. Do you know Christy?
So we entered into, we're entering in or entered into contracts for porta potties, hand washing stations, potable water, security, and then biosolutions for the environmental remediation. So the lion's share of that amount would likely go to biosolutions. So however long it's going to take to clean it up. But as far as the services that we're providing, those are roughly $25,000 contracts for potable water, et cetera. So when those dollar amounts are out, we'll have to come back and have that discussion. Are we going to go out and do informal requests for quotes again to get new contracts? So those were just limited contracts just to get us started.
Like limited for like a month or something, or
A few months,
a few, like 3?
roughly.
Okay.
And again, biosolutions is going to be the most expensive part of that whole process for the remediation, the cleanup.
Okay. So you're saying for trash and everything, it's 25,000, or is each one 25,000?
Potable water, we did a contract for 25, portable toilets and hand washing stations is 25. It's one contract, and then security's 25. So potable water and water will last longer. Potable water and the contract for toilets and hand washing stations, those contracts will last longer than like the security one would, for sure, just because of the costs associated.
What about just regular trash? Because we have this bio cleanup, but what about just regular trash? What do they usually charge?
Regular trash?
Yeah, like let's say we have a dumpster there and we have to dump it out every week or something.
Yeah, so that's part of the biosolutions contract.
Right.
They're managing the dumpster. So I don't know exact cost and what it is, probably around $500 to dump a 30-yard or something like that. But that's folded in with the biosolutions contract. They're managing that part of it for us.
I mean, I was just trying to think, okay, so if we get a real managed camp with security, what kind of projection? And you're saying like 2 million is what we should allocate, but I'm just trying to break it down so I can extrapolate.
Yeah, the 2 million was just a placeholder. I've started to look at how much managed camps cost. There's one in Placer County that has 50 tents. And Placer County signed a contract with a nonprofit for a 6-month contract with a nonprofit for $1 million. One of the biggest costs of managed or supported camps is security. So if you look at having 24/7 security, that's 8,760 hours per year. If you multiply that by an hourly cost of $60 an hour, that's over $500,000. So that's one of the biggest costs would be security and 24/7 security, just based on the number of hours that's required. There's also a managed camp in the city of Los Angeles. They have 70 tents, and it's a $2 million contract for a year. I wasn't able to determine if that includes one-time costs in terms of setup of the camp, or if that's just operating. So those are just some starting points.
I just met a security person Saturday, and his firm may have the contract for this. I don't know.
For the Juniper Ridge,
Yeah,
it's a Compass.
yes, that's who I met. Diego. So, okay.
So in this section, homeless camp supported and managed, there's a $2 million starting point. Is that the amount, or could there be less? And yeah, I mean, Eric just gave us some good numbers. 6 months and a year at a time is $1 million easy.
Yeah.
That
I mean, the other,
that isn't even a support camp. That's something we're doing to bring a site into hopefully into code compliance, so that to mitigate the code complaint from surrounding property owners. That's not some of those costs would be similar to what would be involved in actually operating or supporting a managed camp, but it's we're not providing any on-site management essentially at North Juniper Ridge right now. So that would be something that's very different between what we're doing there and an outdoor shelter of some kind.
So do we leave $2 million there?
I think we should right now.
So as well.
Here you go. Okay. Do with a bunch of zeros, please.
And that brings us to that will use up all of the remaining general ARPA balance. So that would mean we would need to pull. You can do the math here, a certain amount out of one of the contingencies if you want to stick with that $2 million. This is where it gets a little bit messy.
Well, then the next two items are contingency items, so
Mhm.
we can consider those before we need to think about
Sure.
pulling money from any of those contingency pots.
Just for reference, that the amount that would need to be pulled is $322,594. But we can move down to the next item if you'd like.
To get to the 2 million, we would. still
Right.
leave it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, didn't understand.
300 and what?
324.
It's 322.
322,594.
And we do have health services in the room, if you'd like to ask questions about the next couple items on the list.
Did you see that Janice had kind of some additional thoughts on the health services? What, I thought Robert said that
Yes, health services is here and they do have some thoughts. And
additional,
Yeah.
beyond the presentation this morning.
Please come join us.
Can we hear those?
We were just waiting for a party invitation.
There you go, the invitation.
Received, we've
Yeah.
RSVP'd. No, commissioners, thank you. We heard your request to think about other alternatives for amounts, and we had put together a couple of ideas, and I'm going to let Cheryl talk through the details because I always get in trouble if I try to interpret her data for her.
Well, so I'm just to make sure where we're at. So let's talk about those, those two next items. We think of these as contingencies for under public health response and health unintended consequences. And these are two requests. So, this will be the discussion trying to get both of those in line here.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of prioritizing, I spoke with Holly and I spoke with my public health colleagues, and Holly is comfortable letting go of the request for the stabilization amounts in lieu of requests that keep current staff doing good work employed. So I think if we had to reduce the amount, that's one decision we would make fairly readily, even though it's not ideal. It doesn't mean that anybody is looking at less permanent employment and we're not losing capacity. So that's just one piece of information. So we're really talking about the public health emergency preparedness response capacity ask specifically.
Yeah, and I think in classic health services fashion, we work within the constraints that we have. So we've developed a couple reduced cost scenarios. So I think, I'm not sure what comes first. This is a little bit of chicken and the egg, but we have thought about what that looks like. Those thresholds, the minimum is 487,667, so 490,000 to 732,000, more than that. So that's the range of potential options we've come up with to meet the most pressing needs.
So for those two line items, is that broken out at all? So the public health crisis client support and then public health response and recovery. I'm just trying to, looking at this spreadsheet, are there numbers for each one of those line items, or you're just kind of putting them both together at this point in time?
The crisis.
So that's what we're trying to do, is get through this spreadsheet.
I think
The spreadsheet of
if I heard correctly,
174,000, we're willing to
setting that
take off.
aside.
The whole thing, okay. so
Hundred and seventy-four is gone. So
yeah,
now you're
they don't-
talking
yeah.
487.
No. We're talking.
That was your minimum.
That's the minimum, and that would end one current staff. So that is certainly not the ideal. So if the full 1.1 million isn't a palatable amount at this point in time, our next option would be to reduce the time frame for two of those positions. One of them we see as, I mean, they're all critical, but the most critical is that position that would actually be downgraded from a supervisor to a community health specialist 3. And that position is the only position we have that actively works with community-based organizations. So really coordinating and those CBO efforts for emergency response and recovery that we would ask to maintain through ARPA through December 31st, 2026. That brings the total to 733,000.
And the management analyst.
That one also would be reduced to December
Right.
31st, 2025.
So then, as I say, looking at the spreadsheet again, we're talking about the second line item, public health response and recovery at 700 something and nothing for the other line item. Because as I say, I'm just trying to
Correct.
keep my brain straight in this spreadsheet.
Yeah, and let me.
You just said
describe it.
487 minimum. I wrote
Oh,
it
yeah,
down.
no, I mean,
So, and then you give a range. So what were you talking about when you said 487?
So I'm going to talk about it in terms of actual people and services, because I don't want to talk about it just as numbers.
But the payroll for the health department is almost $50 million. Personnel on the bottom line, 50 million, 49, $800,000 or something. So, there's a lot of people there in your financial statement. Because
Yeah, we serve
just
the
looked at
entire
it.
community with public health, and we serve 6,000 people a year with behavioral health. So we have a big staff. We have a very large staff. This is a very particular team that does emergency response work. And I can talk about what each individual does if that helps you make a policy decision about the work that you want to see continue and the work that you maybe feel is less critical. I mean, it is your call as policymakers, but I don't know that I want to talk about just the numbers because it's not how I think about the work. So if you want to know what the positions do, I can tell you what they do. And I think that might help you kind of get to the bottom line with us,
I'd like to.
if
hear
that's
what
helpful.
I'd like to hear what the positions do.
Okay. So so Cheryl described one position that is a person who's currently in a supervisor role because the COVID emergency response team has shrunk. We do not need that person to be in a supervisory role. We do need them to continue to do work to get dollars and services into the community via CBOs when there's an emergency. So they've done things like stand up vaccination clinics for Spanish-speaking people, for people in encampments, they've helped coordinate with some of our long-term care providers, with other teams. So they do a lot of that community-based work. That's just one example. But any emergency, they would be involved in the outreach, the wraparound services, working with community organizations. That's one. Second one is a management analyst who collects all of the data that goes into the public information that goes out in heat events, smoke events, fire events, et cetera. So they're doing a great deal of sort of collecting data, collecting emergency management data, coordinating with that entity, put that together. The third position is Marissa. You're all familiar with her. She's done a lot of work on the homeless encampment projects. She's working closely with Christy and with me on the small group that's doing work to try to think through the cleanup efforts and what comes next. So Marissa's doing the coordination with the service provider community. Last piece of information, we would love to sustain all of those positions. We already have Marissa through the end of this fiscal year. I think Heather's preference, and she is on vacation and not able to speak to that, was to definitely keep the emergency preparedness broader capacity, which are the two positions that I spoke about first, and extend those as long as we can. So that's the service impact. That's what those people do. And Cheryl can sort of tell you how those numbers all play out with the actual dollar amounts for positions.
So Commissioner Dare, it's going to be you're going to go to your meeting at 2:30. So I'm just worried we're going to.
That's when it is.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a 2:30 meeting there. So I think it's kind of, it is numbers today. I mean, great job explaining what's going on there, but you mentioned 400 and something and 700 something. I think it's down to those two numbers. So I'm just thinking is there any clarity on this at this time? And thank you very much for being flexible. As I say, I'm glad I said my piece this morning. I was like, oh, it'd be nice if we could dial this in because there's a lot of other requests on the backside of this too.
Well, let me clarify. There is a third option that's right in the middle between those two. Like I said, that was the range that we could foresee us to continue functioning, the minimum, knowing that we're going to lose some capacity on that one. And the next one down from our ideal, which gets us through to the next biennium. So the in-between one is 647,000.
So that's your spreadsheet kind of with, the services and the people and getting the numbers to that. And that's to the end of the biennium you're saying. So the one that was just started basically.
December 2025.
Yeah. 640. I'm comfortable with that. 647.
That sounds good to me. I wish we could do more. It's very difficult because in some ways what we're talking about is the continued ramp down from COVID. I mean, we had a public health emergency. We built an incredible capacity to respond to that. And we're struggling with this question of how much of that capacity do we maintain? for the next emergency, which we don't know what it's gonna be and when it's coming exactly. But that 647 kind of trying to maintain, that full capacity, the full capacity that we have for a given period of time. That's what I would support.
So just so you know what you're supporting, that particular option continues all three positions through December 2025. That's what it does in effect. And part of the ask was that we make them regular positions, and then we make decisions that we need to make when we head into fiscal year 26 about whether or not we can sustain those positions. And they're all three existing FTE, not new.
And maybe by some point, maybe before December 2025, we'll have a sense of what the public health modernization.
We hope by June of 25, we know what the modernization dollars look like, if not sooner. Although often we're planning after the fact.
We usually find out, yeah.
We
in
usually find
August.
out after we've submitted our budget to you.
Understood. So, number proposed is
647.
47, yeah. Go ahead and put that in, and whichever line is the right one now.
So,
There we go.
for those decisions thus far. So at the top of the screen, again, we had thank you. We had the two contingencies for public health response and unintended consequences. If we back out the 647, it leaves 628,000. If we fund the shortage for the $2 million of the 322,594, if you want to release that contingency to fund that 2 million and then have the remainder, should leave you with 306,182.
I can start.
Well, as I say, I mean, I do see that this is the time to kind of channel the dollars and not use the contingency to guide those final commitments at this time.
Funky, but we will get there. Okay, so then add. Back over there. Uh-oh. It is. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Like that. Okay.
What is the total add up so far? Is it
We're looking at those
394?
Yeah.
top number, the top box is the resources and the other two is what we spent now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of the remaining funds, 906,000 of that is what we had in the childcare workforce contingency.
Yes.
So as I say, I mean,
There we go.
that may be the guidance to get to those new community requests for neighbor impact.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, obviously pretty much everything else is starting to fall off.
Well, the nice thing is that if we grant that full amount, the full amount requested for the neighbor impact childcare workforce asks, it actually is less than the full contingency amount that we had allocated. So that even would free up a little bit.
Yes.
And if we're rather than go through this list of community requests in order, I think it might be good to grapple with that one first. I would support allocating that full 672,000 to these childcare workforce development efforts. They are critically important, especially in this environment where essentially at the fundamental level, the math for childcare doesn't work out.
But were you listening to the numbers? Because we had given them $1,060,000 and then we gave them 284,000. That's $1,000,003. And they said they had 43 candidates. Well, that's like 31,000 a candidate. So
Instead of 9.
why is it, I know, she said 9,000 and I'm going like, I'm adding up all this and I'm going, why
There's
is,
a lot more, they're doing a lot more than just doing that direct training for those 43. They're doing, they're doing, essentially business counseling and other things for leaders of childcare, providing, this additional mental health support to people who are in childcare and to, both directly to people who are, childcare practitioners, and also supporting them in understanding what all these kids are going through who have been, at home with their parents and their siblings for, a chunk of time during COVID. So there were a lot of things that were being done, but in addition to the direct training of those 43.
okay, well, I'd love to know if the 43 are still doing the program. What is the success rate? Okay, so the people that started out 2 years ago, are they still in the program? Or, they decided that, no, this isn't really for me. I mean, they might be doing all these other things and I realize our kids need a lot of attention, but it just seemed like there's a lot of money being spent and I'm not sure if we need to do $672,000 worth for it on top of what we've already done.
Karen explained how a number of the childcares where those trainees were placed to do their training were really eager to have even additional trainees come through. So
Well, I'm sure they are because everyone is short, but I just was wondering why it's a lot of money. I would be happy to do 500,000, but it just seems like it's a lot of money. And we do have some other requests in here that I feel like if we can come up with a few more dollars for them, it would be helpful.
So you'd support the program, paring it down a little
Just a
bit.
touch. Yeah. I just feel like, they've had a lot of funding from us. And honestly, I would have hoped that they would have had more than 43 go through it.
Well, so you mentioned 500,000 kind of. as a total.
72.
Right, yeah.
500,000, that's fine.
Yeah, so there you go.
Support that. Okay.
So just 5,000, whatever, in one of
It's
those.
still $500,000. I mean, it's still a whole bunch of money.
The neighbor impact childcare has 2, but just put $500,000 in one of those ones.
Okay.
Probably that one. Yep. Could be spent as they see
Allocate.
appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
And
Between the
as,
two
and
programs.
as, while we're speaking about neighbor impact as important a project as the food warehouse is, I would agree with whichever my fellow commissioners said earlier. We have already allocated $2.4 million to it, and it's really hard to think of adding to that.
I know, especially that amount. I don't know.
I mean, I will do whatever I can in my power to talk to other people about contributing to that project, but I feel like we extended ourselves pretty far by putting $2.4 million in on the front end, and there are just too many other needs.
Oh, so so put 0 in there. There's 2 commissioners saying that,
We're at 712,182 left.
which is what's in there already. But yeah, what is it?
712,182 left to allocate. If you're using all the contingencies.
But that's okay. Yeah, that's the total number now. We're just dialing down to 0. So okay.
And that's not putting anything for that million. I mean, we could always have things come back, couldn't we? I mean, it is possible.
An important decision point for that again is that December 31st, 2024, we just want to make sure we have a project approved because all funds have to be obligated by that point. So that way, if there are returned funds or other uses, we can make sure we use it for that.
Okay, so now
Like us to consider our two wastewater.
Yep, okay.
Let's,
Wastewater requests.
Yep,
so let's do those two.
both of them.
Yeah, the 75 and the 190.
You know, after hearing the presentation on Terrebonne, you know, they're so close and they just need help with this last step. But I also, I wonder if they could make it happen with a little less than 190. It's a significant amount of funding on top of everything we've already obligated from the very beginning of that project.
Fact that the project is even going to happen, I think, is a miracle.
It is a miracle.
I'm
And-
comfortable doing 190.
Yeah, let's just, that community, it's good to help them.
I mean, because that's a go. You just say.
Right, we're so close.
Discussed, Tomalo is still a lot more of a community conversation about even what's going to happen. But I do understand some of this can be used for, possible design solutions, taking them and putting them on paper for the community to understand too. Okay, so
So
we
now-
got two things.
Those
fully
two,
funded.
with those two, what do we got?
Now we're at, with those two, the 190 and the 75,000 added. So now you have 447, 182 remaining.
Well, less than $500,000. Who could have thought?
If we're, looking at these two very recent childcare requests, one thing I would say is I'm very concerned about granting requests for day-to-day staffing or, paying your monthly lease on your building, because if we do that for one childcare, we should be ready to receive a mound of requests from every single other childcare that also has personnel costs and lease costs.
Well, that's just paying off their rent. They consolidated their program and, that's, I guess they thought it was a good ask.
I mean, it's, I totally understand, A, childcare is extremely important. B, it's a totally reasonable thing to want to seek support for or help for. But I just, as policy for us, I think if we start paying someone's monthly rent or paying for their, for them to retain their staff, then we open ourselves up to a whole bunch of other childcares saying, why did you do that for them and not for us? And that's really, that's a really problematic, position to put ourselves in. The other piece from April Farmer's request from Sisters, so that's more of a one-time ask for infrastructure to get a building to the point where it's usable as childcare. I would, if we're going to entertain childcare requests, I'd lean much more towards that part of the request, that the one time, this is transformational capital project that'll get us to expanded childcare, rather than the other part of the request, which was, please pay for subsidize our staff for a certain period of time.
Just skipping to something, what about the Shield? What about just doing $5,000? We ordered them 20 already. If we just added 5, because they're asking for 25 here. What is it? That would be 50 hours of counseling.
250 hours.
Well, no, if we just did 5,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, just to help that out, because I know we do have a lot of veterans out there. How many of them are we losing on a daily basis? It's the number has gotten really up there.
It's getting down to the range where it's almost like a discretionary grant lottery dollar request. So
I know, but we don't even really have 5,000 now, because we did cut back, remember, our grant funding on a quarterly basis. So, if we just did 5,000 there, at least that would help them out. They would have some more help.
I would support that. It's a small amount that we can put in there. So I'd go back to the food warehouse project. So how about $250,000, some number? And the reason is, I mean, this is a project. There's been a lot of fundraising done already. We did put in a big amount. This is foundational for Central Oregon and all the nonprofits and food distribution and programs we have. Bringing that and for emergency support and management too. Bringing that facility to the next level is kind of foundational for all of Central Oregon. It is, out of Portland, that's the next big place for food warehouse. So, I mean, if we're looking at, these smaller amounts of money, I'd still go back to that. And, balancing that with Mountain View Community Development, that's a big, bold ask, and it'd be great if we could get there, but it looks like we're just not going to be able to get there today. I like the idea that we're putting that money in for the homeless camp supported managed camps. So that's going to really help something, but not the big capacity for capital for.
But did you see what happened to our
Development.
courthouse? It first was at 62,000 and then it was at 54,000 and then it's like, now it's like at 50,000 because they were aware of the costs involved and because they knew we had our number, it was 40,500, and that's what we were going to spend. And so they actually went from that point of view. So it's really
The
unfortunate.
state gave us 15 million. I mean, this is inflation
Well,
because it was a $25 million project that's, expanded to 40 real fast.
yes, it was 27 million and then it went to 40, but I mean, it got really big. And then when they started costing it, every time I'd look at it, it was smaller and smaller because they knew we had a budget and it's just
We
like,
looked at shelling out a fourth floor too. I mean, we dreamed bigger and they came up with bigger numbers and, we had to scale down. But I think the food warehouse is a different kind of animal in that, they have been operating grossly under capacity, in terms of space for years now. And the demand is just going to keep increasing as the population keeps increasing and as there are many, many more people who are living on the margin and needing nutritional assistance in our community. So I
250.
I believe in it as a project. I just feel like we have put in so much ARPA funds already.
how about 150?
That's fine. As I say, I'm just proposing that something gets put there.
Okay,
Can we clarify? I've heard 250 and 150. Just want to know where the board.
But he's not supporting it and she mentioned 150.
I
So
said 150.
looks like 150
150.
is the number.
I mean,
Okay.
to let them know that, yeah, it's
Or 150.
So yeah,
it's a project, but yes.
so that's a number.
So now you have 292,182.
As I say, if we're, go ahead. I was gonna say, I mean, if, Mountain View Community Development asked for a big one, 1.5 million. So I don't know if any funds are gonna help that or how much it really fits into the big picture of what we want to do. Because then this, this could be that instead of a contingency, it could be fitting into the Deschutes County reimbursable ARPA eligible costs and just sit there for the next, year and a half possibly.
What about doing like 200,000? I think we really did support Redmond tremendously with the 900,000 for the Bethlehem Inn. And the city didn't at that point in time, remember, they were going to be asked for 450,000 and they didn't do it and we did it. So if we at least give them something, I feel like that's
Who's that? Mountain View?
Mountain View. I mean, I really appreciate their program. They're modeling after
yeah.
Austin and I don't want to say no, but at this moment in time, it doesn't really fit and hopefully we can get some more funding from the state. But, they're asking for a lot.
Support some kind of a seed funding investment as well. What's the amount?
Well, I said 200. So, okay, 250. Does that work?
Yeah. That's.
I mean, it's not 1.5 million, but it will help.
There's 292,182 left.
I kind of like to leave a little bit there just in case.
200,000.
Whatever, 200, 250, one of those. Are we,
It's for 200,000.
There
okay,
you go.
okay, so. So,
Amazing.
okay, it's time for me to go upstairs.
Okay, so then do you support ARPA general balance or just putting it in a reimbursable ARPA eligible cost category for the future?
Category for the future.
Okay,
just-
yeah, so then the number is 0 after today.
And then, sorry, Commissioner, or unless there are two, can we just
Yeah,
have a motion at the
she's
end to
gotta run
approve
off.
the spreadsheet? And we'll put the remainder 92,182 in that placeholder.
Eligible reimbursement.
Eligible reimbursement for expenditures
Good for
already
the county.
incurred. And we just need a motion approving as
Go ahead
amended.
and say so.
So move.
There you go. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang. Yes. Chair votes yes.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Great job.
Oh,
An hour.
and we'll close down the ARPA
Yeah,
request for more information.
there's truly 0
We've
now.
allocated all of the dollars out.
And you never know, we may have more coming back.
Well,
Hope not.
It could be
we'll see where
surprising.
that
All
goes.
those great projects happen.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for being flexible, Commissioner. With that agenda item complete, do we want to do anything else today or any other items or?
Really at the discretion of the board, we did have executive session scheduled next week, if that works better.
Yeah, next week, just it's a good discussion that we can do together.
The only other item here is Stephanie Robinson is going to come down to review the county college presentation. to the Board, we can also push that to Monday, if that works best to have a full board present for that review. That presentation hasn't changed a lot since it was provided to last year's class, so just at your,
We kind of have the look and feel going too right now, huh?
so
Yeah, and has it been sent to all of us?
we did, and we can get
Yeah,
more
okay.
copies into your boxes before
Yeah.
Monday, if that would be.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. Okay, so I'll be speaking at the Redmond Rotary tomorrow using a pared down county presentation, basically just 2 topics, kind of, and then questions. Solid waste siting, landfill siting, and east side of Redmond, kind of the big picture. And it's good, Oasis Village, Mountain View. And I'm going to mention the long-term visitor area, basically still trying to digest what that possibility might be in coordination with city councilors, because 2 or 3 of them are going to be at the meeting. So as I say, I'm not demanding or overstepping per se, but I'm definitely dropping some ideas out there.
Want to propose, if you want to drop your ideas and present them as your ideas, that's
Well, yeah, that's to say that's exactly what I'm doing. So, okay. And anything else? Yeah, meeting adjourned.